The link between the largest American companies of the first half of the 20th century and Nazi Germany is a topic that remains subtly hidden from the general public. The most successful American companies of the last century maintained close commercial ties with one of the European countries most committed to industrial development, Germany. The appointment of Adolf Hitler as Chancellor of that country highlighted the economic and political interests of major U.S. business leaders. Today, in this new installment of Military History, we will examine the means by which the most important U.S. companies maximize their profits, even in the midst of the most important war in history, regardless of the loss of millions of lives.
Cuando Hitler toma el poder en el 33, empresas estadounidenses tenían grandes inversiones en el mercado alemán. Cuando la política de Alemania cambia, dicen: no podemos retirarnos porque perderíamos la mayor parte de nuestras inversiones. Desde el principio están colaborando con el Tercer Reich.
1933. 2 years before becoming German Chancellor, Hitler declared to the media, "I consider Henry Ford my inspiration." The future German leader greatly admired the innovative assembly line production system implemented thanks to Henry Ford's inventiveness. Not only that, they both agreed on a fundamental ideological issue for the Nazis: anti-Semitism. Going back a few years, in the late 1920s and early 1930s, firms such as Ford and General Motors began relations with leaders of the National Socialist Party. At that time, U.S. automotive companies were competing among themselves for entry into the lucrative German market. Thus, this early alliance between European politics and U.S. capital combined two central aspects: the pursuit of greater monetary profit and a profound hatred of the Jewish people.
Los líderes industriales estadounidenses consideraban a Hitler y a las dictaduras europeas como una posible solución a los problemas que tenían con los movimientos obreros y los sindicatos. En opinión de Ford, los sindicatos eran obra del diablo.
The major market players considered the advent of an autocratic government which would eliminate any association dedicated to defending workers' rights, such as unions, to be advantageous. For its part, Germany welcomed the insertion of American capital into German soil. Seeking to strengthen this ties, on July 30, 1938, Henry Ford was awarded the Grand Cross of the German Eagle. This insignia was reserved for foreigners who embodied the ideals of National Socialism. This distinction had also been received, in June 1937, by another business giant, IBM founder Thomas J. Watson. This industrial network was thus established that enabled Germany's excellent performance during the first half of World War II. Henry Ford had allowed the branches of his automobile manufacturing company in Germany to become arsenals at the disposal of the Nazis. Thomas Watson, for his part, provided the Hitler regime with an automation technique capable of creating lists that expedited the deportation and subsequent extermination of millions of Jews in concentration camps. Thus, IBM's technology contributed to the Holocaust figures reaching truly enormous levels. The company's product was cards designed to store information, with perforations representing different types of personal data: age, educational level, address, and religion. This led to the Nazi censuses of 1933 and 1939. Despite his initial association, and following the Nazi invasion of several European countries, Watson returned his medal in June 1940. He claimed that the policies of the Third Reich were incompatible with those of his company, but the damage had already been done. In 1939 alone, IBM had delivered more than 1 billion punch cards to Nazi Germany. The company's top officials had declared that this technology would benefit the purity and health of German politics. Furthermore, IBM's technological advances facilitated the accounting of war spoils obtained during the German invasion of Poland and promoted the method of cataloging individuals typical of the concentration camp system.
Demográfico. La tecnología de IBM se utiliza en Alemania para empezar a contar la población y organizarla de maneras demográficas óptimas. Se ve una relación muy clara entre este interés del gobierno alemán por empezar a contar a sus ciudadanos y conocer la demografía, en lo religioso y en lo racial, y en todo lo que ocurriría durante el Holocausto.
Ford and IBM weren't the only American firms that sponsored the Third Reich's heyday. General Motors also provided support, providing a colossal boost to the Wehrmacht's shock troops, the German ground forces. While this company refused President Roosevelt's request to increase American arms production, it agreed with the Germans to convert its plants for military production. This position also threatened the reputation of Ford and General Motors as arsenals of democracy, as it demonstrated that they were manufacturing the same military weapons intended to fight the Allied troops. But the list goes on. Another figure decorated by Hitler with the Grand Cross of the German Eagle was James D. Mooney, vice president of the Opel company. This act of gratitude from the Führer was due to the businessman's support for the measures implemented by the National Socialist regime. This inclination led Mooney to transform Opel into an arms manufacturing firm. The change was partly prompted by the outbreak of World War II, which halted automobile production. This pause prompted Opel to begin manufacturing combat aircraft parts, and the commercial exchange between the powerful American executive and the leadership of the Third Reich improved the bilateral relationship between North America and Germany.
Mooney expresa una cierta simpatía por la política de los nazis. También él opina que Alemania había recibido un trato demasiado duro por parte de Francia e Inglaterra después de la Primera Guerra Mundial. Goering anima a Mooney a que haga de intermediario entre los países en guerra. Mooney lo consulta con el presidente Roosevelt y este accede a poner John como moderador.
James D. Mooney remained unconditionally under the command of the Führer. For example, when the American Army landed in Europe in June 1944, he witnessed German soldiers driving Ford or Opel trucks.
You hear that? Sounds like GMCs.
Not only this, but many of the Luftwaffe's aircraft had also been manufactured by Opel. It is also important to emphasize that without General Motors' collaboration, attacks like those in Poland and Russia would not have been possible. An even more thorny factor relates to the arrival of the Americans in the cities of Cologne and Berlin. There, production and assembly plants belonging to the Ford Company were operating. When U.S. troops took control, they found groups of foreign workers working in confinement, confined behind barbed wire fences. Entrepreneurs like Henry Ford, among others, used prisoners of war and concentration camp inmates as slave labor with the approval of the German government.
Al principio hacían marchar a los prisioneros desde los campos de concentración a las fábricas cercanas y después de la jornada de trabajo volvían a los campos. Pero esto era poco práctico. Al avanzar la guerra se establecían secciones o pequeños campos de concentración en las grandes fábricas. Así los prisioneros permanecían allí todo el tiempo trabajando.
Henry Ford's anti-Semitic fervor was thus associated with his passion for business. It is no exaggeration to say that this businessman did everything in his power to keep Hitler in power and, as far as possible, help him win the war. However, it is necessary to focus on another man of great importance who worked to foster a connection between Germany and the United States of America. His name was Gerhard Alois Westrick, who served as the Führer's unofficial ambassador to the American business community. Westrick's proposals attempted to address certain shortcomings in the American economy, given that it was going through a period of relative vulnerability. The proposals, then, were based on an invitation to a period of prosperity, projected for after the end of World War II. If the United States had not opposed Germany by that time, it would address two of the country's concerns: its idle gold reserves, valued at $19 million, and its relationship with Latin America. Westrick asserted that a post-war era would be approaching in which Germany would unify all of Europe, and that, therefore, this group of regions would form a continental-type economy. This would cause European standard of living and consumption to grow exponentially, which would benefit the United States by creating a market it could supply with a vast array of products. Hitler's unofficial representative asserted that European demand for crops would be sufficient to also rescue surpluses from the United States, Canada, and Latin America. What Westrick proposed was too tempting, a virtuous coexistence between the old and new continents. Ultimately, the German envoy's purpose was to seduce American capitalists to oppose their country's entry into World War II. Meanwhile, American investments would consolidate the coalition and lead Germany to victory. However, Westrick avoided mentioning the significant taxes Hitler had planned on imports. The trap was set, and many, whether for monetary or political reasons, had decided to support the Third Reich's business representative. The resolution of this rapprochement came when British intelligence services discovered the messenger's mission and shared the news with their American counterparts. The press then got hold of the leaks, causing a real scandal.
Hay noticias cómicas sobre esto en los periódicos de Nueva York en esta época porque la prensa acampa delante de la casa de Westrick y empieza a seguir todos sus movimientos como si fuera el FBI. La prensa estadounidense echó a Westrick del país. Se escribía tanto sobre él en los periódicos que no pudo seguir con su misión y finalmente se marchó rumbo a Japón.
Continuing with the financial aspects of the close relationship between the United States and Germany, one cannot overlook the involvement of shell companies. These were established to establish business dealings through the intervention of Swiss banks. This was fundamental to the advancement of the National Socialist war machine, as Swiss banking institutions deposited looted funds. Hitler and other high-ranking Nazi officials used Swiss banks to conceal their income from vast sums of money. Similarly, the SS was responsible for systematically looting the assets of countries occupied by the Nazis. Thousands of properties belonging to Jews taken to extermination camps were confiscated by the National Socialist government.
Por ejemplo, el oro de los bancos centrales de los estados ocupados, o también el oro de los dientes de las víctimas judías. Las SS lo fundían todo en lingotes y lo llevaban a los bancos suizos y se quedaban con las divisas.
In conclusion, it is important to emphasize that wars encompass aspects that go beyond armed conflicts and military strategies. In them, especially during World War II, a series of economic positions are debated between countries that often fail to recognize sides and even territorial borders in pursuit of generating paltry sums of money. Now, after delving into the various aspects of the collusion between American business conglomerates and the German National Socialist government, it is time to say goodbye. Thank you very much for following us until the end. We look forward to seeing you again in our next video.